So Andrew, tell me, what is today really all about?
Today is about bringing some of the women who operated EDSAC back in the 1950s to come and see our machine. We're getting to the stage of completion that we're having to think about the layout of the operator's desk and how the machine was used. So we want to capture their experiences of that and get their feedback on how accurate our machine looks compared to the original, of course, they knew and loved. I'd like to welcome our special guests today. We have Joyce Wheeler, one of the early users and wife of David Wheeler, Margaret Marr, who was very involved in the early days operations. Liz Howe, I think, came more with EDSAC too, but remembers the early pioneers. We'd love to hear your stories about working the machine, your stories about working with people like Maurice Wilkes, David Wheeler, Bill Rennick, the other engineers. They're going to hopefully answer questions and share their memories. And to help us with that, we have some journalists here also, who I'm sure will also want to capture some of their reminiscences. So it's a day about memories. We're also very pleased to have Fred Harris, who's with us today, who many people remember as a presenter when the BBC ran its series of programmes at the start of the microcomputer era. There are several photographs of the operator's desk, and they're all from different dates, and they all look slightly different, and we're intrigued to know what some of those changes were about and what the machine was like to use.
Did I hear you say that there was a programme for primes that used to run in at spare moments, did you say over
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about that? That was David's, was it?
Yes, yes.
So,
and it was set up so that it could be restarted by the engineers.
It would carry on trying to...
Yeah,
machine primes, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Machine primes, yes.
So when the machine was idle overnight and nobody was there, they would put this program...
No, when the engineers were there during the day and they needed something to run.
Yeah.
If the machine was running and and they didn't have to do any particular work on it, and there's some spare capacity, they'd always run that prime numbers program. Or at least that was one of the ones.
When they stopped it, it could start from where it had left off.
Yes, I think it punched out next stage or whatever.
Right.
And did they have diagnostic programs?
I was going to say, I think these are the test tapes sitting here. And there was one of David's programs, W something or other, which wasn't diagnostic, but the engineers would say if that would run, the machine was okay. That's about all they could say. Yeah, I think those are the test tapes.
Well, that probably answers my question. That might also be the post-mortem tapes as well, do you think?
Could well be. Could well be.
I notice you're always talking about she. I presume they were all women?
They more or less were. This is the 1950s. Men had come back from the war, but they moved into the more technical jobs, so all the engineers were men. Women were still doing a great deal of clerical and administrative work and indeed machine operating. It was kind of a continuation of women being involved in work during the war. By the time you get into the 1960s, you see the women leaving the industry, driven out by the men. In this modern age, we're working very hard to get them back in, and these days back in at all levels, as system designers, programmers, as well as obviously operating and maintaining equipment.
One way until something happened, and then you turned it the other way to something else, and you put it here.
No problem. It's just
no, I definitely only had one for me. Yes, and I remember sort of watching. I was doing an integration, and it did a step adjustment according to the
and you could see that changing.
And you could watch that changing. You could see how the integration was progressing.
And I wonder, did you use these other tubes which were showing, for example, the current order? Or was this the engineer's domain?
One only used that occasionally.
Yeah. And similarly these, the multiplier and the accumulator.
Yes, was definitely the main one.
Yeah. These dominate the thing, they're so big.
And this stack was irregular. Once the top half stuck forward a bit.
Oh, that's interesting. We can arrange that.
Yes.
Well, ladies, you've seen it now. What do you think of it? How authentic is it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yes. It brings back so many memories. Yes. And
I go home very happy tonight.
much too clean.
Yes, that's the thing.
I will sort that.
Yes.
Yeah. Come back in 20 years.
Now, you had to teach yourself programming, and yet programming didn't really exist as a study in those days. So how on earth did you go about it?
Learned it basically from a book, and also from Brian Hazelgrove, who had written the basic program I was using. And so I was able to look at his program and learn from that as well. And a lot of the routines I used were library routines that had been written by people like Stan Gill, and David Wheeler, of course, and others.
We were just called into the careers office at the school and told, you've got a job starting next Monday, Cambridge Computer Lab.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Did you not?
No.
I imagine we'd advertised. We used to punch tapes for people such as Joyce. Well, you punch your own, but other people we used to, used to say punch tape for us. And I was also sent on the cake run down to Fitzbilly's. Used to sit up in the electrical department testing valves when there was a problem or when there was nothing to run. And generally used to just keep an eye on everybody. We'd put the tapes in, we'd get the tapes ready to give back to people when they were run, and chase people for not filling in the logbook. I remember distinctly Sir Edward Bullard never filled in the logbook because he used to have to fill in when they started, and repairing tapes, just generally.
Your husband, David, invented the subroutine, didn't he?
Yes, he did, because he realised it was a much more efficient way of writing programs. And he started by writing things like print routines, which and other programs for that. He also wrote the first programs for EDSAC 1, including the operating orders.
You're being very, how should I say, you're being very delicate here because you're also a programmer, aren't you?
Ah, yes. I was a user rather than an originator, but I had some nasty differential equations to solve, and the only way of doing that was to use the EDSAC. And my supervisor, Fred Hoyle, told me to go along and see the people there.
So the equations you were trying to solve were to do with the life cycle of stars? Or
it was the structure of a star, the inner temperature and pressure and things.
Pretty complicated stuff.
Yes, quite difficult differential equations to solve.
And that couldn't have been done with hand-cranked machines, I think?
No, people had tried, but they always made errors. Never completed it satisfactorily.
Now, this was part of your PhD?
That was my PhD, yes.
And did it work?
Yeah, oh yes.
Thank you, ladies.
So, Fred, Joyce just mentioned her husband, David, and we've punched out a paper tape of the programme he ran in 1949 for EDSAC, which is the Primes programme. And it's quite an important demonstration. The first EDSAC programme was a table of squares, but you could build a calculator to do that. Only a computer can do primes, because to compute primes you have to take decisions, and that's the difference between a calculator and a computer. So there's a paper tape, Joyce, with David's
Thank you very
programme.
much. That's lovely. Yes.
Every prime number you will ever need.
Well, it's EDSAC, you have to wait quite a long time.
Yes, yes.
Great. Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you very much.
And then just looking towards this other handsome gentleman behind this handsome.
Eye tests are available.